Hello, and welcome to Boring Science to Sleep, a quiet place where science becomes slow, soft, and easy to drift through. Tonight, we're going to gently explore a journey to the edge of the solar system. Not to learn everything, but simply to notice it, slowly and calmly, as though you were quietly floating through an endless sea of light and silence. But before you settle in, if you truly enjoy these peaceful journeys through the wonders of science, you're welcome to like this video and subscribe, only if it feels right for you. And when you're ready, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It's always a quiet joy to see how many places and quiet moments gather here together beneath the same sky. Now, dim the lights. Perhaps let a fan hum softly in the background. Settle into the most comfortable position you can find, and allow your breathing to become just a little slower than before. There is nowhere you need to go, nothing you need to solve, nothing waiting for your attention except this quiet journey. You are safe, you have plenty of time. Tonight, you are simply drifting outward, farther than any road has ever reached, farther than the clouds, farther than the moon, beyond the familiar worlds that have watched over humanity for thousands of years. Together, we will leave the warmth of the sun behind, visit distant planets wrapped in clouds and ice, drift through fields of silent stones, pass lonely worlds where sunlight has become little more than a memory, and eventually arrive where the solar system gently fades into the darkness between the stars. Not in a hurry, not searching for anything, simply noticing, simply drifting. So, whenever you're ready, let's quietly begin. Before you travel to the farthest edge of the solar system, it helps to begin somewhere warm. Not because warmth is exciting, but because warmth feels familiar. As you quietly drift through the darkness, you notice that the blackness around you is not empty at all. Tiny points of light shine gently in every direction, each one another distant star, each surrounded by its own quiet story. Among all of them is one star that feels different, not larger than the others, not brighter than every star in the universe, simply closer, closer to you, closer to home. This quiet yellow star has watched every sunrise you have ever known, warmed every ocean that has ever existed on Earth, and gently illuminated every face that has ever looked toward the sky. We simply call it the sun. It is easy to imagine that the sun has always been here, patiently glowing in the center of our neighborhood, but its story began long before planets existed, long before oceans reflected its light, and long before anyone could wonder where it came from. If you could travel back through time, farther than the oldest mountain, farther than the oldest ocean, farther even than the earliest life on Earth, you would eventually arrive at a place that looked surprisingly quiet. There were no planets, no moons, no rings, no familiar worlds. Only an enormous cloud drifting through space. It stretched across distances almost impossible to imagine, yet it was incredibly thin. Even though it contained enough material to build an entire planetary family, the particles inside it were scattered so gently that they would have seemed almost lonely. Tiny grains of dust floated beside invisible gases. Nothing hurried. Nothing collided with great force. Everything drifted with extraordinary patience. For millions of years, the cloud quietly wandered through the galaxy, almost unnoticed among countless others. Then, very slowly, something almost magical began to happen. Gravity. Gravity is often described as a force, but tonight you might imagine it differently. Imagine thousands upon thousands of tiny whispers, each one inviting nearby particles to drift just a little closer. No sudden pulling, no dramatic movement, only an endless series of gentle invitations. Little by little, those invitations became impossible to ignore. The cloud slowly gathered toward its own center, almost the way morning mist settles into a quiet valley before sunrise. As more material drifted inward, the center became warmer. Not all at once, not quickly, simply because every tiny particle arriving carried just a little energy with it. The great cloud began to turn, very slowly at first, almost too slowly to notice. If you have ever watched cream slowly swirl into a cup of tea, or leaves drifting around the center of a calm pond, you already understand the feeling. The motion was graceful, steady, patient. As the cloud continued to shrink, the gentle spinning became a little faster, flattening the cloud into a broad, delicate disk. Near its heart, something remarkable was quietly taking shape. More and more material settled into the center. The pressure slowly increased, the warmth slowly deepened, until, after an unimaginably long time, the heart of the cloud became bright enough to shine. A new star had quietly opened its eyes. That star was our sun. It did not burst into existence with dramatic fireworks. Instead, you might imagine a fireplace slowly coming to life on a cold evening, beginning with a faint glow before filling the room with gentle warmth. From that moment onward, light began its endless journey in every direction. Some of that light would eventually reach tiny worlds that had not even formed yet. Around the young sun, countless grains of dust continued their slow dance. They bumped together softly. Sometimes they drifted apart. Sometimes they stayed together. Little by little, those tiny pieces became pebbles. Pebbles became rocks. Rocks became worlds. No one built the planets. No invisible hands carefully placed them where they are today. Instead, countless small moments, repeated over millions of years, slowly created everything that would become familiar. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, the distant giants wrapped in clouds, the frozen worlds beyond, even the tiny icy objects waiting near the edge of the solar system all began as quiet pieces of the same ancient cloud. In a way, everything you will visit during this journey is part of one very old family. Every mountain, every moon, every ring around Saturn, every comet drifting silently through darkness, even the atoms inside your own body once belonged to that slowly turning cloud. You are not separate from this story. You are one of its quietest chapters. As you continue drifting beside the sun, its light no longer feels ordinary. It feels like the gentle heartbeat of an ancient home, patiently illuminating every world that circles around it. Soon, we will begin visiting those worlds one by one, starting with the smallest planet that races closest to this quiet star. But for now, there is no need to hurry. Simply remain here for another gentle moment, floating beside the warm light that began billions of years ago, knowing that every distant destination ahead shares the same quiet beginning. Somewhere just beyond this comforting glow, the first small world is already waiting, almost hidden within the brilliance of the sun itself. As you drift a little closer to the sun, the warmth around you slowly grows brighter, not suddenly, but with the gentle certainty of morning arriving after a long night. Ahead, almost hidden within the sun's brilliant light, is the smallest of the 8 planets. It is easy to overlook. It has no colorful clouds stretching across its sky, no towering rings, no giant storms, no blue oceans reflecting sunlight. Instead, Mercury greets you with something much quieter: stone, ancient, weathered stone. From a distance, the planet almost resembles our own moon, its surface covered with countless circular marks left behind by visitors from a very distant past. Every crater tells the story of a collision that happened so long ago that even the oldest mountains on Earth would seem young by comparison. Mercury has carried these memories for billions of years. There is almost nothing here to erase them. On Earth, wind smooths the land. Rain reshapes valleys. Rivers slowly carve new paths through rock. Ice comes and goes with the seasons. Even the oceans patiently polish the coastline, one small wave at a time. Mercury has none of these quiet artists. There is no flowing water. There is no gentle rain. There is almost no air at all. Instead of a thick blanket of atmosphere surrounding the planet, only an incredibly thin scattering of tiny particles drifts above its surface. It is so delicate that, If you were standing here, you would not experience the comforting feeling of a sky stretching overhead. Above, you would simply be space itself, black, silent, filled with distant stars that remain visible even while the sun blazes nearby. Without a protective atmosphere, sunlight falls directly onto the rocky ground. Where the light shines continuously, the surface becomes astonishingly warm. Yet only a short distance away, where darkness patiently waits, the temperature falls to extraordinary cold. It almost feels impossible that one small world can hold both intense warmth and deep freezing silence. But Mercury does exactly that. Not because it is unusual in a dramatic way, simply because there is so little here to hold on to heat once the sunlight moves on. You might imagine placing a smooth stone beside a warm fireplace. The side facing the fire grows pleasantly warm. Turn it away, and little by little, the warmth quietly slips back into the room. Mercury behaves in much the same gentle way, only on a far greater scale. As you continue drifting above the surface, another remarkable detail slowly comes into view. The landscape is not perfectly smooth. Long cliffs stretch across the planet, rising like enormous wrinkles in ancient skin. Some extend for hundreds of kilometers, quietly crossing valleys and craters without apology. These cliffs formed over unimaginably long stretches of time. When Mercury was much younger, deep inside the planet, enormous amounts of heat remained from its formation. As millions of years passed, then hundreds of millions, and eventually billions, that heat slowly escaped into space. The planet cooled, very gradually, almost too slowly to imagine. As it cooled, Mercury became just a little smaller. The rocky outer surface could not shrink smoothly, so it gently folded and cracked, creating the immense cliffs that still remain today. It is almost as though the little planet let out one impossibly long sigh, so slow that it lasted for billions of years. Hidden beneath that ancient crust lies another quiet surprise. Deep inside, Mercury rests an enormous heart of iron. Compared with its size, this metallic core is far larger than scientists once expected. Although you cannot see it from the surface, it quietly shapes the planet in subtle ways, helping create a gentle magnetic field that reaches out into space. It is much weaker than Earth's, yet it is enough to softly guide tiny charged particles carried outward from the sun. Those particles are part of an endless stream known as the solar wind. Despite its name, this is not a wind you could ever feel brushing against your face. It is more like a constant flow of incredibly small particles leaving the sun every second, quietly filling the solar system as they travel through the darkness. Mercury spends every moment immersed within that invisible stream. Yet even here, the little planet simply endures. Patient, unhurried, silent. One of Mercury's greatest lessons is that time moves differently depending on where you choose to stand. Here, sunrise is not something that happens quickly. The sun appears to move across the sky with extraordinary slowness, lingering for what feels like an endless day before finally giving way to darkness. If you could quietly remain on Mercury's surface, you would experience one of the longest days anywhere in the solar system. Not because the planet is reluctant to turn, but because its slow rotation and swift journey around the sun combine in a graceful cosmic rhythm unlike anywhere else. There is something strangely comforting about that thought, a place where morning arrives with unimaginable patience, where afternoon stretches across weeks, where sunset is never in a hurry. Perhaps that is why Mercury feels less like a destination and more like a memory preserved since the earliest days of the solar system, a world that has changed very little while countless other places transformed around it. As you gently leave this ancient landscape behind, the sun still glows brilliantly over your shoulder, while another world slowly begins to appear farther ahead. Its light is softer. Its outline is hidden beneath brilliant clouds. Nothing of its rocky surface can yet be seen. It waits quietly behind a veil that has remained closed for billions of years, inviting you onward with gentle curiosity rather than urgency. As Mercury slowly disappears behind you, the brilliant light of the sun begins to soften ever so slightly. Ahead, another world patiently waits. At first, it does not reveal very much. Unlike Mercury, whose rocky surface lies open beneath the sunlight, this planet keeps its face carefully hidden. From a distance, Venus appears almost peaceful. Its pale clouds glow softly, reflecting sunlight so beautifully that, from Earth, it has often been called the morning star or the evening star. For thousands of years, people looked toward that bright point in the sky and wondered what kind of world might be hiding beneath those luminous clouds. A quiet paradise, perhaps, a gentle ocean, rolling hills beneath a golden sky. It is easy to understand why they imagined such places. The clouds reveal nothing. They simply drift. Layer upon layer, they wrap around the entire planet like an endless blanket, leaving no mountain, no valley, and no ancient crater visible from above. If you slowly float closer, the clouds seem almost welcoming, soft, smooth, peaceful. Yet appearances, especially in the universe, are not always the whole story. The deeper you drift into those clouds, the more you begin to notice that this blanket is unlike anything on Earth. It is incredibly thick. Imagine standing beneath hundreds of warm quilts, each resting gently upon the next. No single blanket feels especially heavy, but together they quietly surround you, holding warmth close instead of allowing it to escape. Venus behaves in much the same way. Its atmosphere acts like a great blanket wrapped around the entire planet. Sunlight easily finds its way through the upper layers. The rocky ground absorbs that warmth. But when the planet gently tries to release its heat back into space, much of it becomes trapped beneath the thick atmosphere. The warmth remains, day after day, year after year, for longer than anyone could possibly imagine. This quiet process is known as the greenhouse effect. Despite its name, you do not need to picture a glass building filled with plants. Instead, imagine wrapping yourself in a warm blanket on a cool evening. The blanket does not create warmth on its own. It simply keeps your own warmth close. Venus has spent billions of years wrapped beneath an atmosphere that quietly holds its heat in much the same gentle way. Little by little, century after century. The result is a world far warmer than its distance from the sun alone would suggest. It is one of the hottest places among all the planets, even hotter than Mercury, despite being farther away from the sun. It seems almost surprising at first, yet the explanation is wonderfully calm. Sometimes, what surrounds a place matters just as much as where it is. As you continue drifting downward, the clouds slowly brighten around you. Sunlight struggles to reach the lower layers. Everything becomes softer, more distant. The sky above fades into a warm glow without a clear beginning or end. Far below, hidden beneath this immense blanket, lies a landscape shaped by fire and time. Vast plains stretch farther than the eye could ever follow. Ancient rivers of lava once flowed across enormous distances before slowly cooling into stone. Great volcanoes rise quietly from the plains, their slopes so broad that they seem less like mountains and more like gentle hills spread across an entire horizon. One of the tallest is called Maxwell Montes. Even its impressive height feels strangely peaceful here, softened by the thick atmosphere that surrounds everything. Across another immense region known as Aphrodite Terra, the surface rises and falls like the slow folds of an ancient landscape that has been resting for countless ages. Nothing about Venus feels hurried. Even its movement through time follows an unusual rhythm. Most planets spin steadily beneath the sun, carrying sunrise and sunset across their skies in familiar patterns. Venus chooses a quieter path. It turns extraordinarily slowly, more slowly than any traveler might expect. If you could somehow stand safely upon its hidden surface, you would wait an incredibly long time before watching the sun cross the sky. And even then, the sun would seem to move in a direction opposite to that of most other planets. The universe is wonderfully comfortable with such differences. It never insists that every world follow exactly the same rhythm. Perhaps the most fascinating part of Venus is not what it is today. It is what it might once have been. Some scientists believe that, long ago, Venus may have been a gentler place. No one can say with complete certainty. The evidence is quiet and incomplete, hidden beneath billions of years of change, yet it is possible that oceans of liquid water once rested upon its surface. Perhaps clouds drifted through a cooler sky. Perhaps rain once fell onto ancient rocks. If that was ever true, the story slowly changed. As the planet warmed, more water entered the atmosphere. That extra water helped hold even more warmth. More warmth allowed even more water to rise. Very gradually, a quiet cycle continued until the gentle balance was lost. The oceans disappeared. The atmosphere grew thicker. The warmth remained. Venus became the silent world we see today. There is something quietly humbling about that possibility. Earth and Venus are often called sisters. They are remarkably similar in size. They formed from the same ancient cloud of dust and gas. They orbit the same sun. Yet over billions of years, each followed a different path. One became the blue world you know as home. The other became a planet hidden beneath endless clouds. Perhaps that is one of the gentlest lessons the solar system offers. Small beginnings do not always lead to the same endings. Two stories may begin side by side, then slowly drift apart, each becoming something entirely its own. As you gently rise once more above Venus, the glowing clouds gradually fall away beneath you. Behind them remains a beautiful mystery, still teaching us, still inviting quiet questions rather than certain answers. Far ahead, another small blue world is beginning to catch the sunlight. Unlike every place you have visited so far, this one carries oceans that shimmer beneath open skies. It is familiar, yet after seeing its neighbours, perhaps it already feels just a little more extraordinary than before. As the brilliant clouds of Venus slowly disappear into the distance, another planet begins to grow larger before you. Unlike the worlds you have already visited, this one immediately feels different, not because it is larger, not because it shines more brightly, but because it seems alive. From far away, the first thing you notice is its colour. Soft blues, gentle whites, hints of green and brown beneath drifting clouds. There is movement everywhere, yet nothing feels hurried. Clouds slowly curl above the oceans. Sunlight glitters across wide stretches of water. The continents rest quietly beneath changing seasons, as they have for countless generations. After the silence of Mercury and the hidden warmth of Venus, this familiar world almost feels like taking a slow breath. Perhaps that feeling is not a coincidence. Earth is, so far as we know, the only world where every breath you have ever taken became possible. If someone who had never seen our planet were to ask what makes Earth so unusual, you might be tempted to answer with a single word: life. And you would certainly be right. But life itself depends on many quieter stories, all gently woven together over an unimaginably long time. One of those stories is water. Water is common throughout the universe in one form or another. It drifts through cold clouds between the stars. It hides inside distant comets. It rests as ice on frozen moons. Yet here on Earth, something rather gentle happens. Water flows. It gathers into rivers. It fills lakes. It rises into clouds before quietly returning as rain. It moves endlessly between sea, sky, mountain and valley, never truly disappearing, only changing its path. You might think of it as the planet's slow breathing, each drop patiently joining a journey that has continued for billions of years. The oceans themselves are astonishingly old. Long before forests stretched across the land, before birds crossed the skies, before the first flower quietly opened beneath the sun. The oceans were already here, reflecting sunlight beneath an empty horizon. Those ancient waters became the cradle of everything that followed. Life did not appear all at once. It began so quietly that no one would have noticed. There were no great forests, no whales, no dinosaurs, no people looking upward at the stars. Only tiny living cells, far too small to see with your eyes, gently floating through warm seas. Their work was humble, patient, almost invisible, yet over millions upon millions of years, they slowly changed the entire planet. Little by little, they released oxygen into the atmosphere, not in great bursts, not dramatically, simply one tiny contribution after another, like countless candles slowly brightening a dark room. Eventually, the air above the oceans became rich enough in oxygen to support larger and more complex forms of life. Every forest, every bird, every animal, every human breath. All became possible because those tiny organisms quietly transformed the world long before anyone was here to witness it. The air surrounding Earth does something else that often goes unnoticed. It protects. Unlike Mercury, where almost nothing separates the ground from space, Earth's atmosphere wraps gently around the planet like a comfortable blanket. It softens the sun's warmth during the day. It helps keep the nights from becoming unbearably cold. It shields the surface from much of the harsh radiation traveling through space. Even the streaks of light you sometimes see crossing the night sky are part of that quiet protection. Tiny pieces of rock enter Earth's atmosphere every day. Most never reach the ground. Instead, they gently burn away high above, becoming brief lines of light before disappearing forever. It is a peaceful reminder that even invisible protection can be remarkably powerful. As you continue drifting above the oceans, another familiar companion slowly comes into view: the Moon. It follows Earth faithfully, neither rushing ahead nor falling behind. For billions of years, the two worlds have quietly traveled together around the Sun. Although the Moon seems silent, its influence reaches deep into Earth's daily rhythm. Its gentle pull raises and lowers the oceans, creating the tides that have shaped coastlines throughout history. Those slow movements became part of life's earliest rhythm, long before clocks or calendars ever existed. There is another quiet movement happening beneath your feet. At first glance, the continents appear perfectly still. Mountains seem permanent. Valleys seem unchanging. Yet deep below the surface, Earth is always moving. Imagine the shell of the planet as a collection of enormous pieces resting upon layers of warmer rock far beneath them. These great pieces drift so slowly that a lifetime passes before their movement becomes noticeable. Sometimes they quietly separate, sometimes they gently meet. When they meet, mountains slowly rise toward the sky. Not in days, not in years, but over millions of years, one patient moment after another. The tallest mountain ranges on Earth are the result of time working with extraordinary patience. Nothing here is built quickly. Even change prefers to move softly. Perhaps that is one reason Earth feels so peaceful from space. Everything is alive with motion, yet almost all of it happens too slowly for human eyes to notice. The forests quietly grow, the oceans endlessly circulate, the winds travel across continents. The continents themselves continue their ancient journey. All of it unfolds with remarkable patience. As you look back one final time, Earth glows like a small blue lantern, suspended within an endless sea of darkness. It is neither the largest world nor the brightest. It is not perfectly calm, nor perfectly gentle. Storms still gather. Volcanoes still awaken. The ground still trembles from time to time. Yet somehow, through countless delicate balances, this small world became a place where oceans could sparkle beneath open skies, where trees could whisper in the wind, and where curious minds could one day begin asking how the solar system itself came to be. Perhaps that is Earth's greatest gift. Not perfection, but possibility. As the blue planet slowly begins to fade behind you, the warmth of home lingers quietly in your thoughts. Ahead, another familiar world waits beneath a sky coloured with soft shades of rust and gold. Long ago, rivers may have wandered there too, and even today, it gently invites us to wonder what stories still rest beneath its silent sands. The soft blue glow of Earth slowly fades into the darkness behind you. Its oceans become smaller, its clouds melt into a tiny point of light. Ahead, another world quietly grows larger. Its colours are softer than Earth's. Warm shades of rust, hints of gold, touches of brown stretching across an endless landscape. Mars has often been called the Red Planet, yet from nearby, its colours are far more gentle than that simple name suggests. It is a world painted by fine dust, spread patiently across mountains, valleys, and plains over billions of years. As you drift closer, the silence feels familiar, not empty, simply peaceful. The sunlight here is softer than it was near Earth. It still warms the land, but with less strength, as though it has travelled a very long way before finally arriving. Above the surface hangs a delicate atmosphere. It is much thinner than the comforting blanket surrounding Earth. If Earth's atmosphere feels like a warm quilt protecting the planet, Mars wears something more like a light scarf, offering only a little shelter from the cold emptiness of space. Because of this, the air cannot hold warmth for very long. The days may feel pleasantly cool beneath the sun, but as night quietly settles across the plains, the temperature falls with remarkable speed. Yet despite its cold and quiet appearance today, Mars continues to whisper about a very different past. If you look carefully across its surface, you begin to notice winding patterns carved into the rock, long channels, broad valleys, ancient deltas where rivers once slowed before entering peaceful lakes. These are not random shapes. They are gentle memories left behind by flowing water. Long before human beings ever looked toward Mars through a telescope, rivers may have wandered across these landscapes. Rain may have fallen from clouds. Lakes may have reflected a pale young sun. No one knows exactly how long that gentler chapter lasted. Perhaps millions of years, perhaps much longer, but little by little, Mars changed. Its atmosphere gradually became thinner. Much of its warmth escaped into space. The flowing water slowly disappeared from the surface, leaving behind only quiet traces written into stone. Those traces remain today, waiting with extraordinary patience for curious visitors to read them. Among the most remarkable places on Mars stands a mountain so enormous that it almost seems impossible. Its name is Olympus Mons. Calling it a mountain hardly feels sufficient. It is a volcano unlike any found on Earth. Its broad slopes rise so gently that, if you stood upon them, you might not even realize you were climbing. Only after traveling an immense distance would you begin to understand the extraordinary size of the landscape beneath your feet. Olympus Mons reminds us that nature often works not through sudden drama, but through patient repetition. Layer upon layer of lava slowly spread across the land over unimaginably long stretches of time, quietly building one of the greatest volcanic structures in the entire solar system. Not far away lies another astonishing landscape. A vast system of valleys known as Valles Marineris stretches across the planet. It is not a single canyon, but an immense collection of deep valleys, cliffs, and ancient fractures. Imagine looking across a landscape so wide that the horizon itself seems unable to contain it. The cliffs descend into shadow. The valleys disappear into the distance. Everything feels calm, yet wonderfully immense. It is easy to imagine that this quiet place has spent billions of years simply resting beneath the changing sunlight. Near the poles, Mars holds another gentle surprise. Bright caps of ice quietly appear against the reddish landscape. With each passing season, They slowly grow and slowly shrink again. Some of this ice is made from frozen water. Some forms from gases that freeze during the long Martian winter before gently returning to the atmosphere when spring arrives. Even here, far from Earth, the seasons continue their patient rhythm. Nothing rushes. Everything follows its quiet cycle. From time to time, the peaceful surface becomes wrapped in enormous dust storms. Fine particles rise into the atmosphere and drift across the planet. Some storms remain small, others gradually spread until almost the entire world is veiled beneath softly moving dust. Yet even these great storms are strangely silent. There are no crashing ocean waves, no forests bending in the wind, only tiny grains of dust carried gently through a thin atmosphere beneath a pale sky. Perhaps what makes Mars feel so close to us is not its appearance alone, it is possibility. Among all the planets beyond Earth, Mars has inspired generations of dreamers. Not because we expect to find bustling cities hidden beneath its sands, not because we imagine dramatic discoveries waiting around every hill, but because Mars quietly asks a simple question. Could life have once found a home here? To help answer that question, remarkable robotic explorers have patiently crossed its surface. They do not hurry, they do not grow tired. Day after day, they slowly examine rocks, climb gentle slopes, and study ancient riverbeds. One rover carefully explored Jezero Crater, a place where a river once flowed into a lake billions of years ago. Another wandered across wide plains, quietly uncovering clues about the planet's distant past. Each photograph they send home is another small page added to a story that is still being written. Perhaps the greatest lesson Mars offers is that planets, much like living things, can change profoundly over time. A world that once held rivers may one day become a desert. A warm landscape may slowly grow cold. A familiar place may become wonderfully different, while still preserving gentle echoes of everything it once was. As you slowly rise above the rust-colored plains, Mars becomes smaller beneath you. Its ancient volcanoes fade into soft shadows. Its silent valleys disappear beneath drifting dust. Yet the questions it carries remain with you. Somewhere beneath those quiet rocks, the memory of flowing water still rests, waiting with extraordinary patience. Ahead, the darkness begins to sparkle with countless tiny points of light. At first they seem like distant stars, but as you drift a little farther, you realize they are something much closer. A vast family of ancient stones quietly circling the sun together, each carrying its own small piece of the solar system's earliest history. As Mars slowly disappears behind you, the darkness ahead begins to change. At first, it almost looks as though countless tiny stars have wandered into your path. But the longer you drift, the more you realize these lights are not stars at all. They are worlds, small ones, ancient ones. Some are no larger than mountains. Others are shaped like uneven stones that have quietly wandered through space since the solar system was young. Together, they form what we call the Asteroid Belt. Many people imagine this place as a crowded field of tumbling rocks, so dense that a spacecraft would have to weave carefully between them. It is an understandable picture. After all, the word belt sounds as though everything must be tightly packed together, yet the reality is far quieter. The asteroids are scattered across an enormous region of space. Most are separated by vast distances. If you were gently floating here, you would not feel surrounded. You might travel for a very long time before another asteroid slowly came into view. Silence still fills almost everything. Space remains wonderfully spacious. That seems to be one of the universe's favorite habits. Even when it gathers countless objects together, it still leaves room for extraordinary emptiness. As you continue drifting among these ancient stones, it becomes easy to imagine that each one is quietly carrying a memory. Unlike Earth or Mars, many of these objects have changed very little since they first formed. They are among the oldest surviving pieces of our solar system, tiny fragments from a time when planets themselves were still learning how to become worlds. Long ago, these small bodies were part of an enormous gathering of dust and rock circling the young sun. Little by little, many of those fragments joined together. Some became Mercury, others became Venus. Earth slowly took shape. Mars quietly emerged. The giant planets continued growing farther away. Here, however, something different happened. The pieces never fully came together. One reason was a powerful neighbor waiting just beyond the asteroid belt, Jupiter. Its immense gravity gently but constantly influenced this region. Whenever clusters of young rocks began gathering into something larger, Jupiter's steady pull often disturbed their delicate dance. Instead of quietly becoming another planet, many of the building blocks continued circling the sun separately, not because they failed, simply because the solar system chose a different story for this place. You might imagine children carefully stacking smooth stones beside a river. Just as the little tower begins to grow taller, a gentle ripple passes through the water, shifting a few stones away. Again and again, the tower almost forms, yet never quite becomes complete. The asteroid belt is something like that unfinished sculpture, patiently preserved across billions of years. Among all these quiet travelers lives one object that seems especially calm. Its name is Ceres. Although it is often grouped with the asteroids, Ceres is large enough to have gently shaped itself into something close to a sphere. Unlike many of its rocky neighbors, it looks more like a small world than an irregular stone. Its surface carries ancient craters, mysterious bright patches, and signs that water once played a quiet role deep beneath its crust. Scientists believe that below its rocky exterior, frozen water may still rest today, hidden beneath layers of ancient material. It is remarkable to think that even here, far from Earth's rivers and oceans, water continues to quietly leave its signature. Not far away drifts another fascinating world, Vesta. Unlike the rounded appearance of Ceres, Vesta carries the scars of tremendous impacts from the distant past. One enormous collision carved out a vast basin near its southern region, sending countless fragments into space. Some of those fragments eventually found their way across the solar system. A few even reached Earth, arriving as meteorites after journeys lasting millions of years. It is a comforting thought that tiny pieces of this ancient world have quietly visited our own planet, carrying stories written long before human history began. Many years ago, a spacecraft named Dawn came to visit both Vesta and Ceres. Its name feels especially fitting, not because it arrived at sunrise, but because it helped illuminate some of the oldest chapters in the solar system's story. Without making a sound, Dawn carefully circled these quiet worlds, patiently photographing their landscapes and studying their hidden histories. It reminded us that exploration does not always require great speed. Sometimes it is enough simply to arrive, to observe, and to listen carefully. Even today, new journeys continue. Another spacecraft, called Lucy, is traveling toward groups of ancient asteroids that share Jupiter's orbit around the Sun. Farther ahead, a mission named Psyche is making its way toward an unusual object believed to contain extraordinary amounts of metal deep within its ancient body. Each mission adds another gentle page to a story that is still unfolding. No single discovery explains everything. Instead, understanding grows slowly, piece by piece, stone by stone, question by question. Perhaps that is the true nature of science. Not rushing toward answers, but patiently gathering small moments of understanding, allowing them to quietly fit together over time. As you continue drifting through the asteroid belt, the sunlight has grown softer than it was near Earth. The sun still shines warmly behind you, but its light now feels gentler, spreading across each rocky surface with quiet patience. Every asteroid casts a long shadow, Every silent rotation marks another peaceful moment in a journey that has continued for billions of years. Eventually, the scattered stones begin to thin. The darkness ahead slowly opens once more. And there, far beyond the last quiet asteroid, something extraordinary begins to appear. At first, it is only a pale glow, then a faint collection of delicate lines. As your eyes slowly adjust, those lines become unmistakable. A giant world waits ahead, wrapped in broad bands of cloud, accompanied by a family of remarkable moons, so immense that everything you have visited so far suddenly feels wonderfully small. As the last quiet stones of the asteroid belt slowly disappear behind you, something begins to change. It is not the darkness. The darkness has always been here. Instead, it is the sunlight. Without quite noticing when it happened, the warmth has become gentler. The bright glow of the sun no longer fills the sky with the same confidence it once did near Earth. Its light now feels softer, as though it has traveled an unimaginably long distance simply to greet you. For a while, there seems to be nothing ahead. Only silence, only space, only the quiet rhythm of your own drifting. Then, almost imperceptibly, a pale curve begins to emerge from the darkness. At first, it could almost be mistaken for a distant cloud. Then it grows and grows, until you realize you are not looking at a cloud at all. You are looking at the largest planet in the solar system, Jupiter. Yet calling Jupiter a planet somehow feels too simple. It is less like arriving at another world and more like approaching a presence. It does not appear suddenly. It slowly reveals itself, filling more and more of the horizon until it seems impossible that something so enormous could exist so peacefully. And despite its extraordinary size, there is nothing hurried about it, nothing aggressive, nothing demanding. It simply rests within the darkness, turning with quiet confidence beneath the distant sun. Long ago, when the solar system was still young, Jupiter gathered an astonishing amount of material from the great cloud that surrounded the newborn sun. Had it gathered much more, its story might have been very different. The pressure deep inside could have grown great enough to ignite like a star. Instead, Jupiter remained something wonderfully unique. Not a failed beginning, not an unfinished ending, simply exactly what it became. A giant world whose quiet presence helped shape the paths of countless smaller worlds around it. As you drift closer, the surface you expected never appears. There are no mountains waiting beneath the clouds, no valleys, no oceans with visible shores. Jupiter is wrapped in layer upon layer of enormous clouds that stretch around the entire planet. Imagine looking down upon an endless sea of cream gently stirred into warm coffee. Soft bands of white, gold, amber, and pale brown slowly flow around one another, each moving with remarkable patience. The clouds are made mostly from the lightest elements in the universe, hydrogen and helium. You do not need to remember those names tonight. Instead, simply imagine materials so light that they seem almost reluctant to become solid at all. They drift, they swirl, they rise and fall in slow motion, creating broad rivers of cloud that circle the giant planet without ever becoming still. Every band moves at its own gentle pace. Some slowly overtake others, some drift in opposite directions. Together, they create a landscape that is always changing, yet somehow always familiar. Among those flowing bands is one feature that has quietly watched the centuries pass. A great oval of deep reddish color, known as the Great Red Spot. It is an enormous storm that has continued far longer than any storm on Earth. It has turned patiently beneath Jupiter's clouds for generations beyond counting. You might expect such a storm to feel violent. Instead, from this peaceful distance, it resembles a slowly turning brushstroke painted across an endless canvas. Even nature's greatest storms can appear calm when viewed from far enough away. Deep within the clouds, flashes of lightning occasionally illuminate hidden layers. These storms are real, powerful, yet from where you quietly drift, the brief flashes seem more like distant lanterns than dramatic explosions, tiny moments of brightness hidden inside an ocean of cloud. There is another invisible wonder surrounding Jupiter. If you could somehow see magnetic fields, you would discover that the giant planet carries around itself an enormous invisible bubble reaching far into space. It quietly guides streams of tiny charged particles flowing outward from the Sun. Most of the time, this vast shield remains completely unseen. But near Jupiter's poles, something beautiful happens. Those invisible particles meet the planet's upper atmosphere, creating immense curtains of glowing light. They shimmer gently above the clouds, much like the northern lights that sometimes dance across Earth's polar skies. Only here, everything feels grander, not louder, not brighter, simply larger, as though the universe had quietly decided to paint upon a much bigger canvas. Around Jupiter travels an extraordinary family of moons. There are many of them, each following its own graceful path through space. Some are small and quiet. Others are worlds remarkable enough to deserve journeys of their own. One hides a restless landscape shaped by constant volcanic activity. Another protects a deep ocean beneath a frozen shell of ice. Another is so large that it exceeds even the size of the planet Mercury. Each one carries a story unlike any other. Soon, we will drift beside them one by one. For now, however, there is something deeply comforting about simply remaining here, suspended above Jupiter's endless clouds. There is no solid ground asking you to land, no destination demanding that you arrive, only gentle movement, clouds endlessly circling, soft sunlight falling across broad bands of color, invisible forces quietly shaping the space around you. It becomes easier to understand why Jupiter has often been described as a guardian of the solar system. Its immense gravity has influenced countless wandering comets and asteroids over billions of years, sometimes drawing them inward, sometimes gently changing their paths. Its presence has quietly helped shape the history of many smaller worlds, including Earth itself. Yet Jupiter asks for no attention. It simply continues its endless journey around the Sun, just as it has since the solar system was young, patient, steady, untroubled by the passing of time. As you slowly drift away from its cloud tops, the giant planet begins to shrink behind you. Its broad bands soften into delicate ribbons of color. Its glowing storms fade into quiet swirls. But its family does not disappear. 4 remarkable companions continue circling nearby, each moving with the same quiet patience as their giant parent. One of them is covered in brilliant ice. Another glows with the warmth of hidden fire. Together, they remind you that even around a single planet, entire worlds are waiting to be discovered, each carrying another gentle chapter in the story of the solar system. Even after Jupiter begins to slip behind you, the journey does not truly leave its embrace. The giant planet may slowly become smaller, but its quiet family continues to travel alongside it. From a distance, they appear as tiny points of light, patient, steady, gracefully circling their enormous companion. Each follows its own familiar path, almost like dancers who have practiced the same gentle movement for billions of years. It is easy to think of moons as simple companions, quietly following their planets wherever they go. Yet here, around Jupiter, each moon has grown into a remarkable world of its own. Each has its own history, its own landscape, its own quiet personality. The first to catch your attention is Io. At first glance, it hardly resembles the peaceful worlds you have visited so far. Its surface is painted with soft shades of yellow, orange, white, and dark grey, as though someone gently brushed warm colours across a canvas of stone. But beneath that colourful surface, something restless continues. Deep inside Io, the moon is constantly being gently stretched and gently released by Jupiter's immense gravity. Imagine holding a small ball of soft clay in your hands. You slowly squeeze it, then relax. Squeeze again, then relax once more. Repeat that quiet motion over and over again. Eventually, the clay begins to warm. Something similar happens inside Io. As Jupiter's gravity gently pulls and releases the Moon during every orbit, its interior slowly generates heat. That hidden warmth escapes through hundreds of volcanoes scattered across the landscape. Some quietly release rivers of molten rock. Others send graceful fountains high above the surface before the glowing material slowly settles back down again. It sounds dramatic when described with scientific words, yet from the silence of space, everything remains strangely peaceful. No sound reaches you, only delicate plumes rising beneath distant sunlight. A world quietly reshaping itself, one gentle eruption at a time. Not far away, another moon quietly waits. Europa could hardly be more different. Where Io glows with warmth, Europa seems wrapped in calm. Its surface shines with bright ice, smooth enough in many places to reflect the pale sunlight like polished glass. Long reddish lines wander gently across the frozen landscape, forming delicate patterns that stretch for extraordinary distances. At first, Europa appears completely frozen, silent, still, but appearances can be wonderfully deceptive. Beneath that quiet shell of ice, scientists believe an immense ocean may slowly move in darkness. Imagine standing beside a frozen lake during winter. The surface is solid, peaceful, silent. Yet beneath the ice, water continues its patient movement. Now imagine that lake becoming so vast that it completely surrounds an entire world. No waves reach the sky. No sunlight touches its depths. Yet somewhere beneath kilometers of ancient ice, a hidden ocean may have quietly existed for billions of years. No one knows exactly what rests there. Perhaps nothing at all. Perhaps only water, or perhaps something far smaller than any fish or whale. Tiny living cells, quietly drifting through darkness. We simply do not know, and somehow, not knowing makes Europa even more beautiful. The universe gently reminds us that wonder often begins with unanswered questions. As Europa slowly disappears behind you, another moon gradually fills your view. This is Ganymede. Unlike any moon you have ever imagined, it is so large that, if it circled the Sun on its own instead of Jupiter, you would almost certainly call it a planet. Its icy surface is marked by bright grooves, darker regions, and ancient scars left behind by countless impacts across unimaginable stretches of time. Deep inside, scientists believe hidden layers may rest beneath the surface, where water and rock have quietly shared the same world for ages beyond counting. Ganymede also possesses something remarkably unusual for a moon. It creates its own magnetic field. Rather than thinking about invisible lines and scientific measurements, imagine a gentle protective bubble quietly surrounding the world. Invisible, silent, always present. A quiet companion traveling with the moon wherever it goes. Finally, there is Callisto. If Io feels restless, and Europa feels mysterious, and Ganymede feels quietly majestic, then Callisto feels ancient, very ancient. Its surface carries so many craters that it almost resembles a memory preserved in stone. Unlike many other worlds that have continually renewed themselves through volcanoes, shifting landscapes, or flowing water, Callisto has remained remarkably unchanged. It has simply continued circling Jupiter with extraordinary patience. Every crater is like another page in an old diary. Every shadow remembers an impact that happened billions of years ago. There is something deeply comforting about a place that has asked so little from time. Together, these four remarkable moons reveal something extraordinary. One giant planet has gathered around itself a family of worlds that could hardly be more different. Fire, ice, hidden oceans, ancient stone, and yet they remain connected through one quiet force: gravity. Gravity does not simply keep them together, It allows them to gently influence one another. Each orbit becomes part of a shared rhythm. Each movement quietly shapes the next. You might imagine four musicians performing the same slow melody. Each plays a different instrument. Each contributes a different sound. Yet together, they create a harmony that no single voice could ever achieve alone. Perhaps that is why Jupiter's family feels so peaceful. Every world remains beautifully different, yet none truly travels alone. As human understanding has grown, these moons have slowly changed the questions we ask about the universe. For many years, people believed that life could only exist on warm worlds beneath open skies. Europa quietly suggested another possibility. Perhaps warmth can come from deep inside a world. Perhaps oceans do not always need sunlight. Perhaps life, if it exists elsewhere, may find gentle homes in places we once overlooked. It is a quiet reminder that nature rarely limits itself to our expectations. As you gradually leave Jupiter's remarkable family behind, the giant planet becomes only another bright jewel against the darkness. Its moons shrink into tiny companions once again. The sunlight continues to soften, the emptiness grows wider. Ahead, another giant patiently waits. Its colors are gentler, its presence somehow quieter, and surrounding it is something so delicate that, from this distance, it almost seems impossible. A circle of light so graceful that it appears less like stone and more like a dream suspended in space. Long before Saturn itself becomes clear, something else quietly catches your attention. At first, it is only a thin line, so delicate that you almost mistake it for a beam of sunlight stretching through the darkness. It does not seem connected to anything. It simply hangs there, impossibly graceful, like the faint outline of a circle drawn across the stars. As you continue drifting, the line slowly widens. Another appears beside it, then another. Soft bands of pale gold and silver begin to unfold, floating so lightly against the darkness that they almost seem too fragile to belong to a planet. Only after a long, quiet moment does the world at their center gently emerge. Saturn. If Jupiter felt like a patient guardian, Saturn feels more like a quiet work of art. There is no urgency in its appearance. Nothing sudden, nothing overwhelming. Instead, the planet slowly reveals itself with extraordinary elegance, as though it has all the time in the universe to introduce itself. Its gentle golden clouds are wrapped by rings so beautiful that, even after centuries of observation, they continue to inspire quiet wonder. From this distance, the rings appear perfectly smooth, like polished circles of glowing crystal surrounding the planet. It would be easy to imagine them as enormous solid disks, carefully placed around Saturn by invisible hands. Yet the truth is even more beautiful. The rings are not solid at all. They are made of countless pieces of ice and rock. Some are no larger than tiny grains, others are as large as houses. Still others are larger than hills. Each one quietly circles Saturn, following its own graceful path. Imagine standing beside a peaceful stream as thousands of autumn leaves drift gently with the current. Each leaf follows its own tiny journey, yet together they create the impression of one flowing ribbon. Saturn's rings are much the same. Millions upon millions of icy fragments travel together in such harmony that, from afar, they become delicate bands of light. Sunlight reaches these frozen pieces and softly reflects back into space. That is why the rings shine so beautifully, not because they create their own light, but because they quietly borrow the light of the distant sun and return it with remarkable grace. As you drift closer, gentle shadows begin to appear. Some parts of the rings glow brilliantly, others fade into soft darkness where Saturn itself blocks the sunlight. The changing light gives the entire system an almost musical rhythm, although no sound exists here. Light becomes the melody, shadow becomes the pause between notes. Everything moves together with extraordinary patience. The rings themselves are surprisingly thin when compared with their immense width. If you could somehow glide carefully through them, you would discover that enormous empty spaces separate many of the icy fragments. Just as the asteroid belt was far less crowded than people once imagined, Saturn's rings also contain far more room than they appear to from a distance. Space, once again, quietly reminds you how much emptiness it loves. There is another gentle surprise hidden within Saturn itself. Although it is one of the largest planets in the solar system, much of its enormous body is made from extraordinarily light material. Rather than imagining heavy stone beneath your feet, picture endless layers of compressed gases gradually becoming denser as they descend toward the hidden interior. There is no clear surface where one could comfortably stand, only deeper layers, each gently pressing upon the next. It is almost like descending through an endless sea whose waters slowly become thicker the farther you travel. Everything about Saturn seems reluctant to become solid. Cloud becomes mist. Mist becomes deeper layers. The deeper layers slowly change again. Each transition happens gradually, almost without noticing. The universe often prefers gentle changes over sharp boundaries. While the rings may be Saturn's most famous companions, they are not the only ones. Far beyond those graceful circles, an entire family of moons quietly follows the giant planet around the Sun. Some are small and irregular, wandering at great distances. Others are large enough to become fascinating worlds in their own right. One of them hides rivers, lakes, and gentle rain unlike anywhere else beyond Earth. Another quietly sends sparkling fountains of water into the darkness of space. Each moon offers another reminder that even in the colder regions of the solar system, surprising beauty continues to appear. But tonight, there is no need to hurry toward them. For now, it is enough simply to remain here beside the rings. You notice how every fragment continues its patient orbit. None attempts to move faster than the others. None tries to escape. Each simply follows the quiet path that gravity has gently written over billions of years. There is something deeply comforting about that rhythm, perhaps because it reminds you that not everything beautiful needs to be permanent. Scientists believe Saturn's rings have changed over immense stretches of time. Tiny particles slowly collide. Some drift inward toward the planet. Others gradually spread farther outward. The rings you see today are part of an ongoing story rather than a finished one. Even something that appears timeless continues to change, only at a pace so gentle that entire civilizations may rise and disappear before the difference becomes noticeable. It is a quiet lesson in patience. Change does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives one tiny moment at a time, until one day the entire picture has softly transformed. As Saturn slowly begins to fall behind you, its glowing rings remain visible long after the planet itself has grown small. The delicate circles continue catching the sunlight, shimmering quietly against the endless black. Eventually, even they begin to fade. Yet two companions remain nearby, still circling faithfully around their giant parent. One hides a thick golden atmosphere beneath which rivers quietly agarse unfamiliar landscapes. The other carries a frozen shell that occasionally opens just enough to let hidden water rise toward the stars. Together, they invite you to discover that some of the most extraordinary places in the solar system are not planets at all, but quiet moons patiently waiting in the cold. Even as Saturn slowly grows smaller behind you, its graceful family continues to accompany your journey. The great rings have become delicate threads of light, almost dissolving into the darkness, but two small worlds remain quietly ahead. They could hardly be more different from one another, yet together they have gently changed the way we think about life in the universe. The first appears as a soft golden sphere. Unlike most moons whose surfaces are immediately visible beneath the sunlight, this one keeps itself carefully hidden. A thick atmosphere wraps around it, blurring every mountain, every valley, every quiet shoreline beneath layers of gentle haze. This is Titan. From a distance, it almost resembles a tiny planet rather than a moon. Its atmosphere is so rich that sunlight struggles to pass through it, creating a warm amber glow that softly surrounds the entire world. If you were drifting toward Titan, you would notice something unusual. The farther you descended, the less you would see. The landscape would remain hidden until you came surprisingly close. The haze would quietly soften every outline, making the world feel more like a dream than a destination. For a long time, no one knew exactly what rested beneath those golden clouds. People imagined many possibilities, perhaps mountains, perhaps endless plains, perhaps oceans unlike anything ever seen before. When spacecraft finally looked through the haze, the truth turned out to be both familiar and wonderfully strange. Titan has rivers, it has lakes, it even has rain. At first, that sounds almost like Earth. But here, the story gently changes. The rivers are not made of water, the lakes are not filled with water, even the rain is something different. Instead, liquids made from simple carbon-rich molecules quietly flow across the landscape. You do not need to remember their scientific names tonight. Simply imagine a world where nature has written a familiar story using different ingredients. The shapes are comforting. The valleys, the shorelines, the winding rivers. Yet everything follows a quieter chemistry, carefully shaped by extraordinary cold. On Earth, water flows through rivers and fills the seas. On Titan, water is far too cold to flow. Instead, it has become as hard as stone. If you could walk there, the ground beneath your feet might be made largely of frozen water, behaving much like rock does here at home. It is a beautiful reminder that the universe often rearranges familiar ideas. What is liquid in one place becomes solid in another. What seems impossible on Earth quietly becomes ordinary somewhere else. Above the landscape, gentle clouds slowly gather. They drift across the sky before releasing soft rain that feeds lakes and rivers below. Then, over time, those liquids quietly rise once more into the atmosphere, beginning the cycle again. It is another version of nature's patient rhythm. Different materials, the same quiet balance. Titan almost feels like a distant cousin of Earth. Not identical, not competing, simply following its own peaceful path through the solar system. As beautiful as Titan is, another moon quietly waits nearby, smaller, brighter, almost dazzling beneath the sunlight. This is Enceladus. From afar, it appears calm. Its icy surface reflects so much light that it almost glows against the darkness. The landscape seems perfectly still, a frozen world resting peacefully beside its giant planet. Yet beneath that quiet appearance, something remarkable is happening. Deep below the frozen shell, warmth continues to linger. Not warmth from the distant sun. That light has grown far too gentle here. Instead, the warmth comes from inside the moon itself. Just as Jupiter quietly stretched its moon Io, Saturn gently tugs upon Enceladus during every orbit. The motion is almost impossible to notice. A tiny squeeze, a tiny release, again and again, across unimaginable stretches of time. Those gentle movements slowly create heat within the moon, enough to keep part of a hidden ocean from freezing completely. Imagine a quiet pond in the middle of winter. A thick layer of ice covers the surface, smooth and silent beneath the pale sky. Yet deep below, water continues to move gently in darkness. Now imagine that hidden water surrounding an entire moon. That is the quiet possibility Enceladus offers. From time to time, cracks in the icy surface allow some of that hidden water to escape. Graceful fountains rise into space, carrying tiny droplets of water and frozen crystals high above the moon before they slowly drift away. There is no roaring sound, no rushing river, only delicate white plumes rising silently into the blackness, sparkling as sunlight gently catches them. Some of those tiny icy particles continue their quiet journey around Saturn. Over immense spans of time, they help renew parts of the planet's beautiful rings. It is a lovely thought. The rings you admired earlier may still be receiving tiny gifts from this small frozen moon. Even worlds that seem isolated remain connected. Everything quietly shares its story with something else. Because Enceladus sends material directly into space, scientists have been able to study those frozen droplets without digging through kilometers of ice. Within them, they discovered ingredients that suggest the hidden ocean below may be surprisingly active. Warm water, minerals, energy. These discoveries do not tell us that life exists there. They simply whisper that some of the conditions thought to support life may quietly be present. And sometimes, a quiet possibility is more beautiful than a certain answer. Perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons these distant moons offer. Warmth does not always come from sunlight. Oceans do not always lie beneath open skies. Life, if it has found a way elsewhere, may have learned to bloom in places we once believed were far too cold and far too quiet. As you slowly leave Titan and Enceladus behind, Saturn's family begins to fade into the distance. The rings become thin strokes of light once more. The moons return to tiny points circling their patient giant. Ahead, the darkness grows deeper still. The sunlight has softened into a pale lantern hanging far behind you. Another world now waits beyond Saturn. It turns quietly on its side, almost as though it chose long ago to dream beneath a different horizon than every other planet. The farther you travel from Saturn, the quieter everything seems to become. The silence has not changed. Space has always been silent, yet somehow the silence now feels larger. The sun, once a brilliant presence filling half your attention, has become a small, steady lantern glowing gently behind you. Its light still reaches this distant place, but it arrives with remarkable patience. Every ray has crossed an immense stretch of space before softly touching the world waiting ahead. For a long while, there appears to be almost nothing. Only darkness, only scattered stars, only the quiet feeling of drifting farther than most travelers have ever imagined. Then, almost without noticing, a faint circle begins to emerge. It is not bright like Venus, not richly colored like Jupiter, not wrapped in shining rings like Saturn. Instead, it seems almost shy, a gentle sphere painted in soft shades of pale blue and green, resting peacefully beneath the distant sunlight. This is Uranus. If Saturn felt elegant, Uranus feels deeply peaceful. There is no dramatic storm immediately drawing your attention, no towering volcanoes, no glowing rivers, no endless rings demanding admiration. Everything about this world encourages you to slow down, even more than before. As you quietly approach, the first thing you may notice is its color. The gentle blue-green glow does not come from oceans. There are no open seas reflecting the sky. Instead, the color belongs to the atmosphere itself. High above the hidden interior, sunlight passes through layers of gas before softly returning to space. Some colors of light continue their journey more easily than others, leaving behind the calm blue-green appearance that has become Uranus's quiet signature. It almost resembles a polished piece of sea glass resting on an endless black shore. Yet perhaps the most remarkable thing about Uranus cannot be seen immediately. It is the way the planet turns. Most planets spin in a familiar way. Imagine a spinning top standing upright on a table. Its north and south poles point generally upward and downward as it gently rotates. Uranus chose a different path. Instead, imagine that same spinning top slowly tipping over until it is almost lying on its side. Now it continues spinning while resting in that unusual position. That is much closer to the graceful motion of Uranus. Rather than standing upright, it quietly rolls around the sun, almost as though it prefers a different horizon than every other planet. No one knows exactly why this happened. Long ago, during the solar system's earliest days, a tremendous collision may have gently changed the planet's orientation forever, or perhaps several smaller collisions slowly guided it into this remarkable position. The evidence has become softer with time, the certainty has faded. What remains is a beautiful mystery. Whatever happened, Uranus accepted its new rhythm and quietly continued its journey around the Sun. There is something strangely comforting about that thought. Not every world needs to move in the same way. Not every path needs to look familiar. Sometimes the universe quietly reminds us that being different is simply another way of belonging. Because Uranus rests on its side, its seasons become unlike those of any other major planet. Imagine living in a place where the sun rises and remains in the sky for an extraordinarily long time, before finally slipping below the horizon. Then imagine waiting just as long for darkness to gently give way to light once again. Near the poles of Uranus, sunlight and darkness each linger for years before slowly changing places. There is no rushing sunrise, no hurried sunset. Everything unfolds with extraordinary patience. If time itself could become sleepy, perhaps it would choose to drift here. As you continue floating nearby, you begin searching for familiar landmarks. Mountains, clouds, shadows. Instead, the atmosphere appears remarkably smooth. For many years, Uranus seemed almost featureless through our telescopes, a quiet sphere with very little to say. Yet as our instruments gradually improved, delicate details slowly revealed themselves. Gentle clouds drifting through the upper atmosphere, soft storms forming and fading, subtle movements hidden beneath what first appeared completely still. It is a lovely reminder that quiet does not always mean empty. Sometimes the most peaceful places simply ask us to look a little longer. Surrounding Uranus is another collection of rings. They are far fainter than Saturn's magnificent circles. If Saturn's rings resemble bright ribbons of light, Uranus wears something more delicate. Thin, shadowy bands quietly circling the planet, almost disappearing into the darkness unless sunlight catches them at just the right angle. They feel less like ornaments and more like whispered memories, easy to overlook, beautiful once noticed. Uranus also travels with a family of moons. Each quietly follows its own orbit, sharing the long journey around the distant sun. Many bear names taken from the characters of old stories and timeless plays, giving the entire system a gentle feeling of poetry. Even here, where sunlight has become so faint, imagination continues to accompany science. Only one spacecraft has ever visited Uranus. Many years ago, a small explorer passed quietly through this distant neighborhood before continuing onward into the deeper reaches of space. Its visit was brief, only a short meeting compared with the billions of years Uranus has spent circling the Sun. Yet even that brief encounter transformed our understanding of this quiet giant. There is still so much left to discover: new storms, hidden layers, ancient stories waiting beneath pale clouds. Perhaps that unfinished feeling is exactly what makes Uranus so peaceful. Not every mystery needs an immediate answer. Some are content simply to remain patient. As you slowly continue your journey, Uranus begins to fade into the distance. Its soft blue-green glow becomes another quiet jewel suspended within the darkness. Ahead, the sun grows smaller still. Its warmth has become little more than a gentle memory, and somewhere beyond that fading light, another giant patiently circles the edge of the familiar planetary family. Its deep blue color hints at restless winds that have traveled through the cold for longer than human history itself. As Uranus slowly fades behind you, the journey begins to feel different once again. The familiar family of planets is nearly complete. The sun has become astonishingly small now. No longer the brilliant ruler of the sky, it hangs far behind you as a tiny pearl of light, quietly reminding every distant world that it is still there. Its warmth arrives only as a faint memory. Its light is gentle enough that shadows seem softer than they once did. Ahead, another blue world patiently waits. For a long time, it is difficult to tell where the darkness ends and the planet begins. Its color blends so naturally with the surrounding space that Neptune almost appears to emerge from the night itself. Gradually, its gentle outline becomes clearer, a smooth sphere of deep sapphire blue, calm, distant, unhurried. If Uranus felt peaceful, Neptune somehow feels even more remote. It is as though the solar system has slowly lowered its voice until only whispers remain. You drift closer. The planet's rich blue color becomes more vivid, yet it never feels bright. It is a quiet color, the color of a calm evening sea just after sunset, the color of a sky that has almost surrendered to night. High above the unseen interior, delicate clouds drift through the atmosphere. Some are bright enough to gently catch the distant sunlight before quietly dissolving once again. Everything appears slow, everything appears peaceful, yet appearances can be wonderfully misleading. Hidden beneath that tranquil beauty, Neptune is home to some of the fastest winds known anywhere in the solar system. Imagine standing beside a quiet lake. The surface is perfectly smooth, nothing seems to move. Then, far below the water, powerful currents continue their patient journey, unseen by anyone above. Neptune is a little like that. From afar, it offers only serenity, but deep within its atmosphere, immense streams of moving gas race around the planet with extraordinary speed. You never hear them. There is no roaring sound reaching across space, only silent movement, only invisible rivers flowing through layers of cloud. It is a beautiful reminder that great energy does not always announce itself with noise. Sometimes strength moves quietly. Sometimes power whispers. Long ago, astronomers noticed enormous dark shapes appearing within Neptune's atmosphere. They resembled giant storms quietly drifting across the blue world. Some remained visible for years before slowly fading away. Others appeared unexpectedly, lingered for a time, and gently disappeared. Unlike mountains or valleys carved into stone, these storms are temporary visitors. They come, they remain, then they quietly dissolve back into the endless atmosphere. Even the largest storms eventually become memories. There is something comforting about that. Nothing is required to remain exactly the same forever. Clouds change, seasons change, worlds continue evolving in ways too slow for any single lifetime to fully witness. Although Neptune receives only a tiny fraction of the sunlight that warms Earth, the planet is not entirely cold inside. Deep beneath the clouds, hidden warmth continues to rise. That gentle internal heat helps feed the movements within the atmosphere, quietly giving energy to the winds that circle the distant world. Imagine wrapping yourself in a warm blanket during a cold winter evening. The air outside may feel crisp and quiet, yet a gentle warmth continues to surround you. Neptune carries something similar deep within itself. Not enough to banish the cold, simply enough to remind the universe that warmth sometimes comes from within. The farther you travel through the solar system, the more often you notice this quiet pattern. Warmth beneath ice, warmth beneath clouds, warmth hidden inside worlds where sunlight barely arrives. Nature seems wonderfully patient in finding ways to keep gentle processes alive. Orbiting Neptune is a remarkable companion. Its name is Triton. Unlike most large moons, Triton follows a path unlike the others. Rather than traveling around its planet in the same direction as Neptune turns, it quietly moves the opposite way. It is almost as though this moon did not begin its story here at all. Long ago, Triton may have wandered through the outer darkness as an independent world before Neptune's gravity gently welcomed it into a new home. Whether that story is exactly true, no one can say with complete certainty, but the possibility adds another quiet layer of wonder to the journey. Triton itself is a world of frozen beauty. Its surface shines beneath pale sunlight. Beneath that frozen shell, ancient forces have shaped a landscape unlike any you have visited before. Long after Voyager passed through this distant neighborhood, scientists continued studying the images it quietly sent home. Among them were signs that frozen materials had once risen gently from below the surface, forming graceful plumes that drifted across the moon. Even here, almost at the edge of the familiar solar system, the story had not ended. Movement continued. Change continued. The universe remained quietly alive. You begin to notice how often this has happened throughout your journey. Mercury slowly shrinking, Venus hidden beneath clouds, Earth breathing, Mars remembering rivers, the restless volcanoes of Io, Europa's hidden ocean, the graceful rings of Saturn, the quiet warmth beneath Enceladus, the sideways dance of Uranus, and now Neptune, where silent winds continue without rest. Every world has spoken a different language, yet every one has quietly told the same story. Nothing in the universe is ever completely still. Even silence contains motion. Even darkness carries change. As Neptune gradually slips behind you, its deep blue glow becomes another distant star among countless others. The familiar planets now belong to the past. Ahead lies a different kind of frontier. The sunlight grows fainter with every gentle moment. The spaces between worlds become wider than ever before. Small icy travelers quietly circle in the darkness, preserving memories from the earliest days of the solar system. Beyond them waits a region where planets give way to countless frozen remnants, drifting patiently through the cold, as though time itself has decided to slow almost to a whisper. As Neptune slowly disappears behind you, you begin to notice something unexpected. There are no more giant planets waiting ahead. For the first time since leaving the warmth of the sun so long ago, the journey feels wonderfully open. The path itself seems to dissolve. There are no obvious destinations standing proudly against the darkness. Only space, only silence, only an endless horizon that gently invites you onward. You drift for a while without feeling the need to arrive anywhere. The sun has become astonishingly small now. It still shines faithfully behind you, but its light no longer rules this distant landscape. Instead, it simply offers a quiet reminder that home still exists, far beyond the immense darkness stretching between you and it. Ahead, tiny points of light slowly begin to appear. Not stars, they move too gently for that. At first they seem almost insignificant. Small frozen travelers quietly following ancient paths around the distant sun. One appears, then another, then many more. You have entered the Kuiper Belt. It is tempting to imagine this region as crowded, filled with icy worlds drifting closely beside one another. But once again, space quietly teaches the same gentle lesson. There is far more emptiness than matter. The frozen worlds are separated by extraordinary distances. Each quietly follows its own patient orbit, often unaware of its distant neighbors. The Kuiper Belt is less like a busy city and more like a quiet countryside, where lonely cottages rest far apart beneath a peaceful night sky. These small worlds are ancient, very ancient, long before Earth grew oceans, long before forests covered the land, long before the first living cell quietly divided beneath an early sea. Many of these frozen objects had already begun their slow journeys around the sun. They are among the oldest surviving members of our cosmic neighborhood. Imagine opening an old wooden chest, hidden safely inside an attic. Everything inside has been carefully preserved. Dust has settled softly across forgotten treasures. Nothing has hurried. Nothing has demanded attention. The Kuiper Belt feels a little like that. A quiet collection of memories that has rested patiently since the solar system was young. Billions of years ago, when the planets were still forming from enormous clouds of dust and gas, not every piece of material became part of a planet. Some fragments remained. Some wandered outward. Some settled here, where the distant cold helped preserve them across unimaginable spans of time. They became quiet witnesses, silent observers, who have watched every chapter of the solar system unfold. Among these frozen travelers are several remarkable worlds, some are round enough for their own gravity to gently shape them into spheres. Others are stretched into unusual forms, quietly spinning through the darkness with graceful determination. One rotates so quickly that it has become noticeably flattened, almost as though it has gently leaned outward beneath its own motion. Another carries a tiny family of moons beside it. Each world is different. Each quietly tells another version of the same ancient story. You realize something comforting. Until now, every destination has been large enough to dominate the sky. Jupiter filled your view. Saturn surrounded itself with luminous rings. Neptune glowed like a blue lantern. But here, nothing asks to be the center of attention. Everything simply exists, together, patiently, without competition, without urgency. The farther you travel into the Kuiper Belt, the more the solar system begins to resemble the night sky itself. Instead of one magnificent world waiting ahead, countless tiny companions quietly share the darkness. Some may never be visited. Some may remain unnamed for generations. Some may quietly continue their journeys long after human civilization has changed beyond recognition. And somehow, that thought feels deeply peaceful. Not every beautiful place needs to be famous. Not every quiet traveler needs to be discovered. Existence itself is enough. As you continue drifting, you notice how slowly everything moves. Not because these worlds have stopped. They have never stopped. Rather, their immense distance from the Sun means every orbit requires extraordinary patience. What once felt like a familiar year near Earth has become something entirely different here. Time itself seems to stretch. The rhythm of the solar system grows quieter with every gentle moment. It almost feels as though the universe is encouraging you to breathe more slowly, to think less, to simply notice. There is no pressure to understand every frozen world you pass. No need to remember every distant name. Instead, you simply allow them to drift quietly across your awareness. One after another, tiny lanterns of ancient ice suspended within an ocean of darkness. Perhaps that is why the Kuiper Belt feels less like a destination and more like a memory. These worlds are not busy creating towering mountains or roaring storms. Most have simply remained, patiently carrying the earliest chapters of our solar system into the present day. They are gentle reminders that beginnings do not always disappear. Sometimes they continue quietly beside us, waiting for someone willing to travel far enough to notice them. Far ahead, one small world begins to separate itself from the countless others, not because it is the largest, not because it shines the brightest, but because, despite its modest size, it has quietly captured human imagination for generations. Its surface glimmers beneath the faint sunlight, with subtle shades of brown, white, and pale gold. A broad, bright plain slowly turns into view, shaped almost like a familiar heart. It is a world that reminds us something very simple. Great stories do not always belong to great giants. Sometimes they belong to the smallest travelers, patiently circling the sun in the deep, quiet cold. The farther you drift into the quiet reaches of the Kuiper Belt, the more every world begins to resemble a distant memory. Each frozen traveler follows its own patient path. Each carries a story that began billions of years ago. Most remain little more than tiny points of light against the endless darkness. Yet one slowly begins to welcome you closer, not with brilliance, not with enormous size, simply with quiet familiarity. This is Pluto. For many years, people imagined Pluto as little more than a tiny frozen dot circling at the edge of the solar system. It seemed distant, mysterious, almost impossible to know. Then, after an extraordinarily long journey through space, a small spacecraft quietly passed by, and transformed that tiny point of light into a real world. Mountains appeared, valleys appeared, plains of ice slowly came into view. What had once been only imagination gently became landscape. As you continue drifting closer, Pluto feels surprisingly gentle. Its sunlight is faint, softer than any light you have experienced since leaving Neptune behind. The shadows stretch quietly across the surface. The colors remain subtle, soft browns, pale whites, hints of gold, occasional touches of reddish earth tones. Nothing here asks to be dramatic. Everything seems content simply to exist. Then, almost without warning, you notice something wonderfully familiar. Across one side of Pluto stretches a broad, bright region, shaped remarkably like a heart. It is known as Sputnik Planitia. You do not need to remember its name tonight. It is enough simply to notice its quiet shape. From this peaceful distance, it almost feels like the planet itself is offering a gentle welcome to anyone patient enough to arrive. The heart is not carved into stone. Instead, it is an immense plain covered by frozen materials that slowly shift across the landscape over vast stretches of time. Although temperatures remain unimaginably cold, these frozen layers are not completely motionless. Very slowly, almost too slowly to imagine, they can creep across the surface like quiet glaciers. Imagine watching honey flow across a table. Now slow that movement so greatly that an entire human lifetime passes before you notice even the smallest change. That gentle patience comes closer to the rhythm of Pluto. Nothing rushes here, nothing needs to. Time itself seems willing to wait. Surrounding the bright plain rise mountains unlike those on Earth. Many are built not from familiar stone but largely from frozen water that has become harder than rock in this extraordinary cold. Here, ice has learned a different role. On Earth, it melts beneath warm sunlight. On Pluto, it stands quietly as the foundation of towering landscapes. The universe enjoys rearranging familiar ideas. The farther you travel, the more gently those ideas begin to change. Above the frozen surface floats a delicate atmosphere. It is astonishingly thin. So thin that it would hardly feel like an atmosphere at all compared with Earth's comforting blanket of air. Yet when sunlight reaches it, something quietly beautiful happens. Tiny particles suspended high above the surface scatter the faint light, creating layers of soft blue haze. Imagine looking toward distant mountains just before sunrise, when gentle mist hangs quietly above the valleys. Now imagine that mist floating around an entire world. Even here, almost at the edge of the solar system, the universe still finds ways to paint with light. Pluto is not alone. Traveling beside it is a remarkable companion called Charon. From a distance, the two worlds appear almost like partners, quietly dancing together. Neither seems entirely dominant. Instead, they circle a point that lies between them, moving with extraordinary harmony. Imagine two skaters gliding across perfectly smooth ice, each gently balancing the other with every graceful turn. Neither pulls too hard, neither lets go. Together, they continue a dance that has lasted for billions of years. There is something deeply comforting about their companionship. Even in the immense solitude of the outer solar system, no world is truly required to travel alone. For many years, people spoke about Pluto because of the way scientists chose to classify it. The conversations were thoughtful, sometimes passionate. Names changed, definitions became more precise. Yet none of those discussions altered Pluto itself. The mountains remained. The glaciers continued their patient movement. The blue haze still floated above the surface. Charon continued its graceful orbit. Pluto never needed permission to remain beautiful. Perhaps there is a quiet lesson hidden there. The names we choose help us understand the universe, but they do not create its beauty. A flower remains beautiful whether or not we know its name. A distant world remains extraordinary whether we call it one thing or another. The universe has never seemed particularly concerned with the labels we invent. It simply continues being itself. As you slowly drift beyond Pluto, you glance back one final time. The bright heart grows smaller. The frozen mountains fade into soft shadows. Charon becomes another tiny companion, circling faithfully nearby. Together, they gradually become two quiet lights, suspended within the immense darkness. Behind them, the sun has become almost indistinguishable from the countless other stars. Ahead, however, lies something even quieter. There are fewer worlds now, more emptiness. You begin to sense that you are approaching the place where the sun's invisible influence slowly begins to lose its gentle hold, where its endless outward breath finally meets the vast ocean between the stars. As Pluto slowly disappears behind you, the journey changes once again. There are fewer companions now. The frozen worlds of the Kuiper Belt become scattered lights, each quietly following an orbit too patient to notice. The familiar architecture of the solar system has almost faded from view. You find yourself drifting through a place where distance begins to lose its meaning. There are no towering planets ahead, no brilliant rings, no colourful cloud tops waiting beyond the darkness. Only space, endless, peaceful space. Yet this quiet region is far from empty. Something invisible has been travelling beside you since the very beginning of your journey. It left the sun long before you reached Mercury. It passed gently by Earth. It flowed beyond Jupiter and Saturn without ever stopping. Even here, where sunlight has become little more than a soft memory, it continues its patient voyage. Imagine the sun breathing, not with lungs, not with sound, but with a steady, endless exhale. Every moment, countless tiny particles stream outward in every direction. They spread across the solar system with remarkable persistence, forming an immense invisible flow that quietly surrounds every planet you have visited. This gentle outward stream is often called the solar wind. Tonight, however, you need not remember its name. Simply imagine an endless breath, a breath so patient that it has never truly paused. It does not rush, it does not struggle, it simply continues. For billions of years, the sun has quietly filled its neighborhood with this invisible river. If you could somehow watch it with your own eyes, it might resemble an endless current flowing across a silent sea. You cannot feel it against your skin, you cannot hear it. Yet it is there, gently carrying part of the sun far beyond the visible light that reaches your eyes. Together, the sunlight and this invisible breath create an enormous bubble surrounding our planetary home. Inside that bubble, the sun still quietly shapes its surroundings. Outside it, another ocean begins. For most of your journey, you have remained comfortably within this invisible shelter without even realizing it. Now, however, something begins to change. The farther you drift, the more resistance the sun's gentle breath quietly encounters. Beyond our solar system lies a vast region filled with the faint material that drifts between the stars. It is unimaginably thin, far thinner than even the emptiest laboratory vacuum on Earth. Yet over enormous distances, even that tiny presence matters. Imagine a peaceful river gradually reaching the sea. The flowing water does not stop all at once. Instead, it gently slows. The currents become more complicated. The smooth movement begins to ripple. Something similar happens here. The sun's invisible breath has traveled so far that it finally begins to notice the quiet pressure of the galaxy surrounding it. There comes a distant region where this outward flow suddenly becomes slower, not because the sun has grown weaker, but because it has reached the edge of its familiar freedom. Scientists call this region the termination shock. The words sound dramatic. The reality is much gentler. There is no wall, no collision, no sudden barrier waiting in the darkness. Instead, imagine a traveler gradually walking into a stronger breeze. Each step continues forward. only the pace slowly changes. Beyond this region stretches another vast expanse. Here, the sun's invisible breath still moves outward, but more quietly than before. The currents become softer, more tangled, less certain. It is almost as though the solar system itself is taking one final deep breath before releasing the last traces of its familiar warmth into the galaxy beyond. You continue drifting. Nothing around you announces that you are approaching an important boundary. There are no signs, no glowing markers suspended in space, only silence, only darkness, only patient movement. Then, somewhere ahead, you arrive at one of the most extraordinary places in our cosmic neighborhood, the heliopause. Its name sounds like the edge of something solid. Yet there is no visible line stretched across the stars, no doorway, no gate, no border that can be touched. Instead, it is a quiet meeting place. On one side, the sun's influence still gently reaches outward. On the other, the vast galaxy quietly presses inward. Neither side wins, neither side loses. They simply meet, like two calm tides touching upon an endless shore. If you crossed this invisible boundary without knowing it was there, you might not notice anything at all. The stars would remain unchanged. The darkness would remain peaceful. Your journey would continue exactly as before. And yet, something profound would have happened. For the first time since leaving the sun, you would no longer be traveling entirely within its invisible embrace. You would be entering interstellar space, the space between stars. That phrase sounds enormous, perhaps because it truly is. Yet even here you discover another quiet lesson. There is no sharp divide between home and elsewhere. The universe rarely builds walls. Instead, it prefers gentle transitions. Day slowly becomes evening. Winter quietly becomes spring. Clouds dissolve into clear skies. The solar system gradually becomes the galaxy. Nature seems to trust patience more than sudden change. You glance back. The sun is almost impossible to distinguish from the countless stars surrounding it. It has become one quiet point of light among many. And yet you know which one is home, not because it shines the brightest, but because every world you have visited still quietly circles that distant light. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all of them continue their endless journeys inside the invisible breath you have just begun to leave behind. Ahead, the darkness opens even wider. There is no longer a planetary neighborhood guiding your way. Instead, one tiny traveler continues onward through this immense ocean, a silent explorer built by human hands, carrying a small golden message into the unknown, patiently continuing a journey that may outlast civilizations, languages, and even memory itself. Far beyond the quiet boundary where the sun's invisible breath slowly fades into the galaxy, you continue drifting through a darkness unlike any you have known before. There are no planets waiting ahead, no rings catching distant sunlight, no frozen mountains slowly turning beneath pale skies, only stars, countless stars, each separated from the next by distances so immense that even your imagination begins to relax, rather than trying to measure them. The silence feels different here, not heavier, not emptier, simply older, as though this region has been patiently waiting long before our sun was born, and will continue waiting long after it has quietly grown old. You continue forward without expectation. Then, almost hidden among the darkness, you notice something remarkably small. At first it hardly seems possible. It is not a moon, not an asteroid, not a distant comet. It is something far more familiar, a machine, tiny beyond comparison, fragile against the endless universe. And yet it continues moving, patiently, steadily, without hesitation. This is Voyager. It is difficult to believe that something built by human hands could travel so far from the world where it began. Long ago, when it first lifted away from Earth, no one expected it to remain a traveler for so many decades. It was built to visit the giant planets, to quietly gather knowledge, to send gentle whispers of discovery back across the darkness. It did all of those things. It revealed new landscapes around Jupiter. It admired Saturn's graceful rings. It introduced us to Uranus and Neptune more closely than we had ever seen before. Then, when its first great journey had ended, something remarkable happened. It simply kept going. No one called it back. No destination waited ahead. There was only the quiet invitation of empty space. And so Voyager continued. Even now, as you drift beside it, the little spacecraft appears almost unbelievably simple. No shining wings, no dramatic engines, only a carefully built explorer carrying its quiet purpose through the stars. Its power grows weaker with time. Some of its instruments have gradually fallen silent, yet it continues speaking. Its faint radio signals travel patiently across the immense darkness toward Earth. Those signals do not hurry. They simply move at the fastest pace nature allows, crossing an extraordinary distance before finally reaching the people still listening at home. Imagine writing a letter to someone you love. Now imagine placing that letter into a bottle and gently setting it upon an endless ocean. You know it may drift for years, perhaps much longer. You cannot know who will eventually find it, yet you release it anyway, not because you expect an answer, but because sharing the message itself feels meaningful. Voyager is something like that quiet bottle, except its ocean is the galaxy, and its journey has only just begun. Attached to the side of Voyager is one of humanity's gentlest gifts, a golden record, not made of gold because it is valuable, but because the material helps preserve it across immense stretches of time. Upon that record are sounds, music, greetings spoken in many human languages, the gentle rhythm of a heartbeat, the laughter of children, the sound of wind moving through trees, ocean waves quietly meeting the shore, bird song greeting the morning, small reminders of a tiny blue world where life learned to listen. Imagine someone finding that record millions of years from now. They may never know the people who created it. They may never understand every sound, yet perhaps they would recognize something beautifully familiar, a desire to say, "We were here, we wondered, we listened." Sometimes the simplest messages travel the farthest. Voyager also carries another invisible gift, not attached with bolts or carefully stored inside a protective cover. Instead, it carries perspective. Long before leaving the solar system, one final request was made. The spacecraft turned its camera back toward home. Far across the unimaginable darkness, it captured an image unlike any taken before. Earth was no longer a world filled with continents and oceans. It was no longer a place of cities, forests, mountains, or rivers. It had become only a tiny point of light, almost too small to notice, suspended within a broad beam of sunlight. That quiet image gently changed the way many people looked at our home. Every mountain ever climbed, every story ever told, every friendship, every goodbye, every song, every dream, every quiet evening beneath familiar stars, all of them belonged to that tiny distant light. It is not a thought meant to make you feel small, quite the opposite. It gently reminds you how precious small things can be. A single candle can warm a dark room. A quiet word can comfort a restless heart. A tiny blue world can hold everything we have ever known. As you continue drifting beside Voyager, you realize something unexpected. The spacecraft is no longer exploring only the universe. In its own quiet way, it has become part of the universe's story. Long after the people who imagined it have grown old, long after the engineers who carefully assembled each instrument have finished their own journeys, Voyager continues, patiently crossing a darkness that asks nothing from it except time. Perhaps that is one of the gentlest forms of hope. Not loud hope, not certain hope, simply the quiet belief that curiosity is worth carrying forward. that asking questions is worthwhile, even when the answers may arrive long after we are gone. Eventually, Voyager becomes another tiny point of light behind you, still moving, still listening, still carrying its small golden greeting into the immense silence between the stars. Ahead, the darkness stretches farther than ever before. Somewhere beyond ordinary imagination lies a vast shell of ancient icy travelers, loosely embracing the solar system from an almost unimaginable distance. It is less a destination than a memory, less a place than a quiet echo of the sun's earliest beginnings. As Voyager slowly becomes another tiny point of light behind you, the journey enters its quietest chapter yet. There are no planets left, no familiar moons, no graceful rings reflecting distant sunlight. Even the scattered worlds of the Kuiper Belt have faded into memories hidden behind unimaginable distances. Ahead there seems to be almost nothing at all. Only darkness, only stars, only an endless stillness that asks nothing from you except to continue drifting. You are safe. There is nowhere you need to arrive, nothing you need to understand. Simply continue floating through the silence, letting the universe become wider with every gentle moment. For a long time, you might wonder whether the journey has finally reached emptiness. Yet the universe has quietly prepared one final surprise. Not a bright world, not a giant planet, not even a place that anyone has ever photographed directly. Instead, it offers an idea, a possibility, a vast region that scientists believe surrounds the solar system like an enormous, nearly invisible shell. This is the Oort Cloud. No one has ever seen the entire Oort Cloud with their own eyes. It is simply too distant, too faint, too enormous. Instead, its presence has been gently inferred from the behavior of long-period comets that occasionally wander inward toward the sun after spending unimaginable stretches of time in the deep darkness. Imagine standing beneath a great old tree during autumn. Every now and then, a single leaf slowly lets go of a distant branch and begins drifting toward the ground. You may never see the branch where it began, yet from the quiet arrival of that leaf, you know the tree is there. The Oort Cloud is understood in much the same gentle way. The comets that occasionally visit the inner solar system are like those falling leaves. Their quiet journeys suggest a distant home hidden far beyond ordinary sight. If the Kuiper Belt felt like a quiet countryside, the Oort Cloud feels more like an immense horizon with no visible edge. Its icy travelers are separated by astonishing distances. Many may spend millions of years completing a single graceful journey around the sun. Others may never approach the inner solar system at all. They simply remain, patient, silent, suspended within the deep cold. Imagine opening a library, unlike any ever built. There are no shelves, no walls, no ceiling. Each book floats gently by itself, separated from every other by vast empty rooms. The stories are ancient, older than mountains, older than oceans, older than every human civilization that has ever existed. The Oort Cloud feels a little like that impossible library. Each frozen object quietly preserves a memory from the earliest days of the solar system. Nothing hurries here. Time has almost become another form of silence. Long ago, when the giant planets were still settling into their familiar orbits, countless smaller icy bodies wandered through the young solar system. Some were drawn inward. Some collided with growing planets. Some escaped entirely into the galaxy. Others were gently scattered outward by the immense gravity of the giant planets. Instead of leaving forever, many remained loosely connected to the sun, traveling so incredibly far away that they became part of this vast, distant cloud. Even here, at almost unimaginable distances, the sun has not completely let go. Its gravity still reaches outward with extraordinary patience. Not as a firm grip, more like a gentle invitation, a quiet reminder that these distant travelers still belong, however loosely, to the family they left behind billions of years ago. Yet the sun is no longer the only quiet influence here. Other stars slowly pass through the Milky Way. Most remain incredibly distant. Their journeys unfold over immense spans of time, but every so often, one glides a little closer, not close enough to collide, simply close enough for its gentle gravity to softly disturb a few icy travelers resting in the Oort Cloud. One comet may slowly change direction, another may begin an extraordinarily long inward journey toward the sun, a third may quietly drift away forever. There are no dramatic collisions, no sudden explosions, only the patient choreography of gravity, unfolding over millions of years with remarkable gentleness. It is almost as though the stars occasionally exchange quiet greetings by nudging one another's oldest memories. That thought feels strangely comforting. Even at the greatest distances, nothing exists entirely alone. Everything influences something else, however softly. Everything belongs to a larger dance. As you continue drifting through this imagined cloud of ancient ice, you begin to notice how completely your sense of scale has changed. Once, Mercury seemed unimaginably far from Earth. Later, Jupiter appeared enormous beyond comprehension. Now, even the entire family of planets feels wonderfully small. The solar system itself has become something you can almost hold within your thoughts. Not because it has shrunk, but because your perspective has quietly grown. Perhaps that is one of the greatest gifts of long journeys. They do not always change the places you visit. Sometimes they gently change the way you see everything that came before. Behind you, the sun has become almost indistinguishable from the countless stars scattered across the Milky Way. If you did not already know which point of light was home, you might never guess. And yet every memory of oceans, every sunrise, every forest stirred by wind, every quiet conversation, every dream ever dreamed beneath Earth's night sky, still belongs to that tiny distant light. You rest with that thought for a while. There is no need to hurry onward. The universe is in no rush. Neither are you. And somewhere beyond even this quiet cloud of ancient travelers, you find yourself gently turning around. Not because the journey is ending, but because, after traveling so very far, it feels natural to look back toward the place where everything began. You drift quietly for a while, without choosing any particular direction. There is nothing ahead demanding your attention, nothing behind asking you to return. Only the immense calm of the galaxy surrounding you. The stars remain scattered across every horizon. Some shine brightly, others barely whisper through the darkness. Together they create a peaceful landscape that seems almost timeless. Then, without urgency, you slowly turn. Not because you have reached an ending, simply because, after traveling so very far, it feels natural to look back. The movement is gentle, almost like turning another page in a well-loved book. For a long moment, nothing seems different. Every direction appears filled with countless stars, each one quietly holding its own family of worlds, its own long history, its own silent rhythm. Then your eyes settle upon one tiny point of light. It is neither the brightest nor the largest. Nothing about it immediately distinguishes it from the countless others surrounding it, and yet you recognize it. That quiet point is the sun. From Earth, the sun once filled your sky. Its warmth shaped every morning. Its light painted every landscape. Its steady presence quietly measured the passing of each day. Now, from here, it has become only another ordinary star. Small, patient, almost indistinguishable from the others scattered across the Milky Way. The change is not in the sun. The change is in your perspective. Distance has gently rearranged your understanding. The familiar has become wonderfully humble. You remember the beginning of your journey, the glowing surface of the young sun, Mercury quietly enduring endless daylight, the hidden clouds of Venus, Earth breathing beneath blue skies. Mars preserving quiet memories of ancient rivers, the patient stones of the asteroid belt, Jupiter's endless bands of cloud, Saturn's graceful rings, the silent oceans hidden beneath distant ice, the quiet blue worlds of Uranus and Neptune, the frozen travelers of the Kuiper Belt, Pluto's gentle heart, the invisible breath of the sun reaching into space, Voyager continuing alone, the ancient stillness of the Oort Cloud. Each chapter now feels less like a separate destination and more like one long, peaceful conversation. Nothing rushed, nothing competed, everything simply invited you to notice. From this extraordinary distance, the entire solar system has become too small to see directly. The planets have disappeared completely. Even Jupiter, the great giant that once filled your horizon, has vanished into the brightness surrounding the sun. Saturn's beautiful rings are gone. Earth itself cannot be seen. There is no tiny blue dot waiting to catch your eye. No familiar moon quietly circling nearby. Home has become invisible. And yet, strangely, it does not feel lost. You know it is still there. Somewhere within that tiny point of light, a small rocky world quietly circling an ordinary star, covered by oceans, wrapped in a gentle atmosphere, home to forests that sway with the wind, mountains that quietly greet the sunrise, rivers that patiently find their way to the sea, countless living creatures sharing one small world without ever seeing most of the universe surrounding them. Perhaps that is one of the universe's quiet gifts. We do not need to see something constantly in order to know it matters. A melody remains beautiful long after the final note has faded. The warmth of a kind conversation stays with you after the voices become silent. Home continues to exist even when it disappears beyond the horizon. You realize that every atom within your own body once belonged to something older. Ancient stars quietly forged many of the elements that would eventually become oceans, mountains, trees, and people. Long before Earth existed, the universe had already begun preparing the ingredients that would one day allow someone to quietly wonder about the stars. In that gentle sense, perhaps you have never been separate from the universe at all. You have always been one small expression of it, just as every planet, every comet, every drifting cloud, every distant star quietly belongs to the same great story. The Milky Way stretches around you like a faint river of soft light. It is no longer simply something you once admired from Earth's night sky. Now it feels like a peaceful neighborhood, one among countless others scattered across the larger universe. Somewhere within one quiet spiral arm rests the tiny point of light you call the sun. And somewhere around that quiet star, a single small planet continues turning with perfect patience. Morning continues to arrive there. Children continue to laugh. Rain continues to fall upon forests. Ocean waves continue meeting familiar shores. People continue looking upward, wondering what lies beyond the darkness. Perhaps, at this very moment, someone is stepping outside beneath a quiet evening sky. Perhaps they are noticing the stars. Perhaps they are asking the same gentle questions that inspired this journey. Without realizing it, they are looking toward the same universe that now quietly surrounds you. There is something deeply comforting about that invisible connection. Distance has not separated you from home. It has simply helped you understand it more clearly. You remain still for a little while longer. There is nothing left to discover tonight, nothing left to explain. Only gratitude for the quiet journey that has carried you from the warm light of the sun to the gentle silence beyond its distant reach. You are safe. There is nowhere else you need to travel. Nothing more you need to hold on to. The stars will continue their patient dance without asking anything of you. The planets will quietly follow the paths they have always known. The universe will remain beautifully vast, wonderfully calm, and endlessly patient. And somewhere, far behind you, one ordinary star will continue shining for one small blue world that has always been, and perhaps always will be, home.